and this is Fawn Cox. There's DNA evidence from her attacker, but no advanced genetic genealogy has taken place yet. Her family is still waiting.
Kansas City police have solved a 31-year-old murder case. Fawn Cox was just 16 years old, and tonight we know the person responsible for her rape and murder.
There's a sound every parent dreads. Not a scream, not a slammed door, just silence. The kind of silence that means something is wrong before your brain even lets you think the words. On the morning of July 27, 1989, in a quiet, close-knit neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri, that silence belonged to an alarm clock. A 16-year-old girl's alarm clock, ringing and ringing and ringing in a bedroom where nobody was getting up to turn it off. Her mother and her little sister climbed the stairs to check on her. They thought she'd simply overslept. She'd worked late the night before, after all. She needed her rest. What they found instead would haunt this family and an entire police department for the next 31 years. Because sometime during that quiet summer night, while her mother slept one floor below, while her little sister slept just down the hall, someone had climbed up to her bedroom window, broken inside without a sound, and taken everything from her. Her safety, her future, her life. And for 3 decades, nobody knew who. This is the story of Fawn Cox. And I want to warn you now, this one is heavy. It's the kind of story that makes you want to go check on the people you love the second it's over. But stay with me, because there's a detail early in this case, a piece of evidence collected the very night this happened, that wouldn't mean anything to anyone for over 30 years. Remember it. It's going to matter more than you could possibly imagine. Before we go any further, if you're new here, this channel covers real cold cases just like this one, researched down to the smallest detail, so you're never watching anything but the truth. Hit subscribe now, because you're going to want to see how this one ends. Let's go back to the beginning. Kansas City, Missouri. The summer of 1989. Fawn Marie Cox was 16 years old. She lived with her family in a home near 9th Street and Van Brunt Boulevard, in a tight, working-class neighborhood in the northeast part of the city. The kind of place where everybody seemed to know everybody, where kids grew up 2 houses down from their cousins, where a summer evening meant porches full of neighbors who'd lived there for years. Fawn had a summer job, the way a lot of 16-year-olds do. She worked at Worlds of Fun, the amusement park just outside the city, the kind of first job that comes with sticky concession stand smells, long shifts on your feet, and the particular exhaustion of coming home after closing time. On the night of July 26, 1989, Fawn worked her shift at the park until 11 o'clock at night. When she got home, she didn't stay up. She didn't linger. She knew she had another shift the very next day, so she did exactly what any responsible 16-year-old would do. She went straight to her room, and she went straight to bed. It was an unremarkable end to an unremarkable summer night. Downstairs, her mother slept. Down the hall, her little sister slept. Outside, the neighborhood settled into the kind of stillness that comes with late July heat, the hum of air conditioning units running in nearly every window on the block, drowning out whatever small sounds might otherwise have carried through the dark. And somewhere in that stillness, somebody made a choice that would end a 16-year-old girl's life and shatter her family's world for the next 31 years. Here's a detail worth sitting with for a moment, because it's the kind of small, easy-to-dismiss moment that so many families in true crime stories describe after the fact. The family dog was agitated that night. Restless. Unsettled, constantly barking, in a way that didn't quite make sense. Nobody thought much of it at the time. The dog was pregnant, and pregnant dogs get restless. It was the easiest explanation, and it was the one everyone reached for. Nobody connected it to anything. Why would they? It was just a dog, having a rough night. But keep that in mind too, because entire timelines can hinge on details this small, the ones that feel like nothing in the moment, and only take on meaning once you know what actually happened. By morning, nobody in that house had any idea. Fawn's mother woke up like she did every day. Her little sister woke up too. And somewhere around the time Fawn should have been getting up for her own shift, her alarm clock started going off. It kept going and going, and nobody came to shut it off. That's when Fawn's mother and her sister climbed the stairs to check on her, expecting, at most, to find a tired teenager hitting snooze one too many times. What they found instead was unimaginable. Fawn was in her bed. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't going to wake up, not that morning, not ever again. The two people who loved her most in the world discovered, in the space of a single terrible moment, that Fawn had been attacked in her own bedroom, assaulted in the worst way a person can be violated, and her life had been taken from her, sometime during the night, while the rest of her family slept one floor below, completely unaware. Take a second and actually sit with that. This didn't happen on a dark street. It didn't happen somewhere she shouldn't have been, doing something she shouldn't have done. It happened in her own bed, in her own home, surrounded by the people who were supposed to be able to protect her, none of whom heard a single thing. Investigators arriving at the scene that morning began piecing together how someone could have gotten in and out of that house without waking anyone. And what they found only made the horror more calculated, more deliberate. Whoever did this hadn't broken in through a door. They had climbed up to Fawn's second-floor bedroom window and forced their way inside from the outside, a method that required knowing exactly which window belonged to her, exactly where her bedroom was in that house, and exactly how to get up to it without drawing attention. This wasn't random. This wasn't a stranger who happened to pick a house at 3 a.m. Whoever did this had information. Familiarity. Some kind of prior knowledge about that home, that bedroom, that specific window. And that thought, that this might not have been a stranger at all, is the thought that would end up haunting this family for the next 3 decades. Investigators also collected physical evidence from the scene that morning, evidence that, in 1989, forensic DNA technology could preserve, but could not yet meaningfully use. DNA testing as an investigative tool was still brand new at the time, barely a few years old anywhere in the country, and nowhere near sophisticated enough to do what it can do today. So detectives did what investigators in that era could do. They carefully collected what they found, catalogued it, and preserved it, without any real way of knowing, yet, who it might eventually identify. Keep this piece of evidence in mind, because it won't matter until much later in this story. A sample collected in the summer of 1989 was about to sit, waiting, for longer than most people's entire careers, for a kind of science that didn't exist yet, for a moment nobody in that room could have possibly predicted. But in the days immediately following Fawn's death, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was finding out who had done this, and the neighborhood, the police department, and Fawn's grieving family were about to be pulled into a chapter of this case that would end up going almost as wrong as the crime itself. News of what happened to Fawn Cox tore through the northeast Kansas City community almost instantly. This wasn't a distant headline to the people who lived there. Fawn had grown up in that neighborhood. She'd gone to Northeast High School. She had friends who lived 2 blocks away, teachers who remembered her, neighbors who'd watched her grow up on that same street. In a community that tight-knit, her death didn't just shock one family. It shook an entire neighborhood to its core. This one touched a lot of people because she was an innocent child who was taken from her own bed. A Kansas City police captain, Ben Caldwell, would later say, reflecting on the case decades afterward, and that sentiment captured exactly why this case became the kind that stayed with the officers who worked it for the rest of their careers. It rattled detectives. It rattled the community. And it demanded an answer nobody could yet provide. In the tense weeks that followed, rumors moved faster than facts. The neighborhood, like so many urban communities in the late 1980s, had its share of trouble, and one name kept surfacing in whispered conversations: a local group of young men some residents referred to as the 9th Street Dogs, known around the area for causing trouble. It seemed, to a frightened and grieving community desperate for an explanation, like the obvious place to look. Investigators pursued that lead hard, and it led them to 3 teenagers. 2 of them were formally charged in connection with Fawn's death. A third was taken into custody and held for 8 months while the investigation continued. 8 months of a teenager's life spent behind bars, based on an investigation that, at the time, felt solid enough to justify it. But this is where things started going wrong in ways that would haunt this case for the next 30 years. When DNA testing, still in its infancy as an investigative tool, was finally run on evidence connected to that third suspect, the results came back inconclusive. Not a match. Not a clean exclusion either, by the standards of that era's limited technology. Just inconclusive. Enough uncertainty that after 8 months in custody, that young man was released. And then the case took an even more devastating turn. The key witness whose statement had helped build the prosecution's case against the 2 charged teenagers came forward and recanted everything. They admitted, according to investigators, that they hadn't been truthful. Without that testimony, the entire case against the 2 remaining teenagers collapsed. The charges were dropped. Sit with what that actually means for a moment. 3 teenagers had been pulled into this case, one of them locked up for the better part of a year, and in the end, none of it held together. No convictions. No trial. No answers. Just 3 young lives disrupted, a community left more confused and more frightened than before, and a family who now had to reckon with a devastating truth. The people they thought might be responsible for what happened to Fawn weren't, as far as anyone could prove, the ones who actually did it. The case, for all intents and purposes, went cold. Not because detectives stopped trying. By every account, the original investigators worked this case relentlessly, chasing down lead after lead, refusing to simply file it away. One captain who reviewed the case years later described it plainly. The original detectives had worked the case into the ground, running down every possible avenue they had access to. But every avenue led back to the same place, nowhere. If you're still with me at this point, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps get cases like Fawn's in front of more people who might actually need this information. And if you've got a theory on where this is headed, drop it in the comments. I want to know if you saw this coming. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more breakdowns of cold cases coming your way on this channel. Now, back to the story. Years passed. Then a full decade. Then 2. Fawn's bedroom, her unfinished shift at Worlds of Fun, her family sleeping 1 floor below while something unthinkable happened above them. All of it slowly hardened into local history, the kind of story a neighborhood tells in hushed tones on anniversaries, the kind of case that gets mentioned in passing at Northeast High School reunions, where former classmates who remembered Fawn would find themselves still asking the same question decades later. Who and why? Her family lived inside that unanswered question for years that turned into decades. And in the quietest, most painful corner of that uncertainty sat something almost too heavy to say out loud. Because whoever did this seemed to have known that house, known that window, known exactly how to get in and out without anyone noticing. Some members of Fawn's own family had privately wondered, at different points over the years, whether the person responsible might not be a stranger at all. Whether it might be someone they already knew. Someone who'd sat at their table. Someone who called them family. That suspicion would live in the back of their minds for over 30 years, with absolutely no way to confirm or dismiss it. Meanwhile, forensic science kept moving forward, decade after decade, largely without this case in mind at all. DNA testing became faster, more precise, more widely used in courtrooms across the country. And then, in the mid-2010s, an entirely new investigative technique began making headlines nationwide. One that didn't just match DNA to existing criminal databases, but could trace genetic material through entire family trees, using the same consumer genealogy websites millions of ordinary people were using to find long-lost relatives. This technique became famous almost overnight when it was used to finally identify the Golden State Killer in 2018. A case that had terrorized California for decades, cracked open using genetic genealogy after traditional methods had failed for over 40 years. Fawn's family watched that story unfold from Kansas City with a very specific, very personal kind of hope. If a technique like that could crack a case that old, why not Fawn's? They didn't wait quietly for someone else to make that connection. Fawn's family actively pushed for it, reaching out, advocating, even organizing fundraisers to help cover the cost of the advanced genetic testing this new technique required, testing that, at the time, was still expensive enough to be out of reach for many local police department budgets, including Kansas City's. And this is where everything changed. The Kansas City Police Department's cold case unit took up Fawn's file again, this time with this new genetic genealogy technology in hand. The testing itself was still too costly for the department to fund on its own, so the FBI stepped in and covered the cost, recognizing both the strength of the surviving evidence and the significance of finally giving this family an answer. And once that testing began, everything that had taken 31 years to reach finally started moving at a completely different speed. Investigators later said the answers came in a matter of weeks. Weeks. After 31 years. The genetic profile extracted from evidence collected at the scene all the way back in 1989, the same evidence gathered before DNA technology could do anything meaningful with it, sitting preserved and waiting for exactly this moment, was run through genetic genealogy analysis. And it began pointing, with increasing precision, toward a specific branch of a very particular family tree. Fawn's own family tree. Now, remember that suspicion some family members had quietly carried for over 3 decades, that whoever did this might have been someone close, someone who knew that house, that window, that bedroom? That instinct was about to be confirmed in the most painful way imaginable. The investigation narrowed to a man named Donald Cox Jr., Fawn's cousin. A relative roughly 5 years older than her, someone who would have grown up in and around the same family gatherings, the same relatives' houses, the same neighborhood, someone who, unlike a stranger, would have known exactly which window in that house belonged to Fawn, and exactly how to reach it without anyone below hearing a sound. But there was a complication. Donald Cox Jr. wasn't alive to be confronted with this discovery. He had died back in 2006, 14 years before this breakthrough, from what was determined to be a drug overdose. At the time of his death, though, his passing had been unusual enough that a medical examiner opened an investigation into the circumstances, just to rule out any foul play. That inquiry ultimately concluded his death wasn't the result of anyone else's actions. Case closed, in the most routine, unremarkable way, the kind of medical examiner's file that gets sealed and forgotten within a year. Except one small detail from that 2006 investigation had been quietly preserved all along. A blood sample, taken as a standard part of that inquiry, and simply kept on file. Nobody in 2006 had any reason to think that sample would ever matter again. It sat in storage for 14 years, completely unconnected, in anyone's mind, to a 16-year-old girl's death 17 years earlier. Until 2020, when crime lab technicians pulled that same preserved blood sample, extracted a DNA profile from it, and compared it directly to the genetic evidence recovered from Fawn's bedroom back in July of 1989. It was a match. 31 years after Fawn Cox went to bed in her own home and never woke up, the Kansas City Police Department finally had their answer. And it was, in the most gutting way possible, exactly the kind of answer part of her family had quietly feared for decades. Someone she knew. Someone from inside her own family. Her own cousin. On November 10, 2020, detectives sat down with Fawn's family and told them what 31 years of silence had finally revealed. Both of Fawn's parents were still alive to hear it. According to the officers who delivered the news, they were sad. Of course they were sad. Hearing a truth like that never stops hurting, no matter how long you've waited for it. But they were also, in a strange and complicated way, relieved. Some of them had wondered about their own relative for years. Now, at least, they knew for certain. The very next day, the Kansas City Police Department made the case public, calling it the first homicide in department history solved using advanced genetic genealogy technology, a technique that, 3 decades earlier, when Fawn's case first went cold, didn't exist in any form investigators could have imagined. Fawn's sister, Fawn Cox, spoke to reporters after the announcement, and her words captured something true about how closure actually feels in cases like this. Not clean, not simple, but real nonetheless. She said it was a relief to finally have answers, even acknowledging that the answers weren't always what the family had hoped to hear. But there was closure. After 31 years of an open wound with no name attached to it, there was, finally, closure. There would be no trial. No courtroom moment where the family could face the person responsible. Donald Cox Jr. had been gone for 14 years by the time his name was finally connected to what happened that July night in 1989, dead long before anyone even knew to ask him a single question. And this is where that small detail from the very beginning of the story finally makes sense. Remember the family dog, restless and agitated that night, dismissed because she was pregnant? In hindsight, knowing now that the person who came through that window was family, someone the dog likely knew, someone whose scent and presence wouldn't have triggered the kind of alarm a true stranger might have, that restlessness takes on a different, quieter kind of meaning. Not proof. Never proof. But one more small piece of a puzzle that, for 31 years, nobody had the full picture to actually see. Fawn Cox was 16 years old. She worked hard all summer at a job she was proud of. She came home after a long shift, and she went straight to bed because she had responsibilities the next day, the kind of quiet, ordinary discipline that should have led to nothing more than another unremarkable morning. Instead, it took 31 years, a preserved blood sample nobody thought would matter again, and a piece of technology nobody in 1989 could have dreamed of, to finally give her family the one thing they had been waiting for since that terrible July morning, an answer, and with it, at long last, a way to finally lay this to rest. Fawn Cox's story isn't just a case that finally closed after 31 years. It's a case that quietly teaches some of the hardest lessons in all of true crime. Here are 5 of them, worth sitting with. In 1989, investigators at the scene of Fawn's death collected biological evidence using the only standards available to them at the time. Standards built around a forensic DNA science that was, quite literally, still in its infancy. There was no way for anyone in that room to run a genetic genealogy search. That technology wouldn't exist in any usable form for another 29 years. And yet, the evidence was gathered, labeled, and carefully preserved anyway, on nothing more than the instinct that it might someday matter, even though no one could say how or when. That instinct turned out to be the entire reason this case was ever solved. 3 decades later, when genetic genealogy finally became advanced enough, accessible enough, and affordable enough, with the FBI ultimately covering the cost, it was that same preserved sample from 1989 that made the comparison possible at all. Without it, there would have been nothing to compare Donald Cox Jr.'s later blood sample against. No match. No answer. No closure for a family that had waited 3 decades for one. This lesson extends far beyond forensic science. It's a lesson about the discipline of doing your job thoroughly even when you can't yet see the payoff, about trusting that careful, unglamorous, procedural work today might be the exact thing someone else needs to solve a problem years from now. The detectives who preserved that evidence in 1989 never got to see this case close. Many of them had likely retired, or moved on, or passed away entirely by the time the answer finally came. They did the work anyway, without ever knowing whether it would matter. And it did. For 31 years, Fawn Cox's case sat unsolved. But unsolved doesn't mean unworked. Kansas City police detectives, by every account, chased down lead after lead in the years following her death, pursuing the community's suspicions, following the initial arrests, running whatever forensic testing existed at each stage of technology's development. One captain who reviewed the file years later put it plainly: the original investigators worked the case into the ground. And still, for decades, nothing came of it. That's an incredibly difficult reality to sit with, both for the detectives who dedicated years of their careers to a case they couldn't close, and for a family who had to live inside that uncertainty for 3 decades, watching their daughters, their sister's case grow older every single year without resolution. This lesson matters because it reframes what a cold case actually is. It's easy to assume that once a case goes cold, it's effectively over, filed away, forgotten, unlikely to ever be revisited. But Fawn's case proves that cold simply means the technology, the timing, or the resources required to solve it haven't caught up yet. It doesn't mean the case is unsolvable. It means the answer is still out there, waiting for the right combination of persistence, science, and circumstance to finally reach it. For any family living with an unsolved loss, that distinction is enormous, not false hope, but real, evidence-based hope, rooted in the fact that cold case units and evolving forensic technology have cracked cases far older than anyone once thought possible. For years, some members of Fawn's family quietly carried a suspicion they could never confirm, that whoever did this might not have been a stranger at all, but someone who knew their home, someone who knew exactly which window belonged to Fawn, and exactly how to reach it undetected. That kind of suspicion is almost unbearable to hold, especially without any way to prove or disprove it. It means living for decades with the possibility that violence didn't come from outside your world, but from somewhere inside your own family. When the DNA finally confirmed that the person responsible was Fawn's own cousin, it validated a fear the family had never wanted to be right about. This is one of the most uncomfortable, but statistically real, patterns across true crime cases involving young victims. Harm frequently comes not from an unknown stranger lurking outside, but from someone already inside the circle of trust. A relative, a family friend, someone whose presence wouldn't raise alarm. This lesson isn't meant to create fear or suspicion toward every family member in every household. It's meant to underscore something harder and more nuanced, that safety isn't just about locking doors against strangers. It's about recognizing that trust itself can sometimes be exploited by the people closest to us, and that acknowledging this uncomfortable possibility, rather than dismissing it out of loyalty or disbelief, is sometimes exactly what allows families and investigators to eventually find the truth. When the Golden State Killer case was cracked in 2018 using genetic genealogy, it wasn't just a breakthrough for one case in California. It sent a signal to cold case units and grieving families across the entire country. Cases once considered permanently unsolvable might not be unsolvable after all. Fawn's family watched that story unfold and recognized, immediately, what it could mean for their own 30-year wait. They didn't just hope passively, they actively pushed for their case to be re-examined using this same technology, even helping raise funds to make the testing possible. This lesson is ultimately about the relationship between innovation and justice. Forensic science doesn't move in a straight line where every advancement only helps future cases. Sometimes, a breakthrough reaches backward through time, taking evidence collected decades earlier, evidence gathered by investigators who could never have imagined what tools might eventually exist, and finally allows it to speak. Fawn's case is a powerful, concrete example of exactly that. A sample collected in 1989, sitting dormant for over 3 decades, suddenly becoming the key piece of a puzzle nobody could complete until 2020. For every family currently living with an unanswered loss, this lesson carries real weight. The science that finally provides their answer might not exist yet, but that doesn't mean it never will. When Kansas City police finally identified Donald Cox Jr. as the person responsible for Fawn's death, there was no trial, no sentencing, no courtroom moment where the family could face him directly. He had died 14 years earlier, long before his name was ever connected to what happened that July night. In the strictest legal sense, justice, accountability delivered through the court system, was never possible. And yet, when detectives sat down with Fawn's family and finally gave them a name, her sister Felisa described it, simply, as a relief. Not perfect. Not the outcome anyone would have chosen. But real, meaningful closure after 31 years of not knowing. This lesson asks us to hold 2 truths at once. It's completely fair and important to recognize that a system which allows a case to go 31 years without resolution, through lost momentum, recanted testimony, and the limits of 1989-era forensic science, represents a real failure that this family had to live inside for most of their lives. And at the same time, it's equally important to recognize that even an incomplete resolution, one without a trial or a sentence, can still offer something profoundly valuable to the people left behind: the simple, human relief of finally knowing. Fawn's family didn't get the justice a courtroom might have offered, but they got the truth. And after 31 years, that truth, however painful, however late, was enough to finally let them begin to heal. If Fawn's story moved you, hit the like button. It helps get her story and the 31 years her family waited in front of more people. Drop a comment. Were you surprised the answer came from inside the family, or did you have a feeling all along? And if cases like this affect you the way they affect me, subscribe now, because there's another story waiting for you that hits just as hard. Because here's the thing about Fawn's case: the truth came from someone close to her. Someone who knew her house, her window, her routine. But at least, in the end, DNA gave her family a name. In another case, on the other side of the country, a family had to fight for over 2 decades just to get anyone to take a second look. And the answer, when it finally came, wasn't hiding in a family tree. It was sitting in a police evidence room the entire time, completely unexamined. A 6-year-old boy. A Sears department store. A mother who looked away for less than 10 minutes. What happened next became one of the most devastating true crime cases in American history, not just because of what was done to him, but because of everything the people meant to protect him got wrong along the way. If you think 31 years feels like an unbearably long time to wait for an answer, wait until you hear what this next family went through and what it finally took to close a case that changed the way an entire country protects its children. Click the video on your screen right now, and let's go back to Hollywood, Florida, 1981. I'll see you there.